Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 5 team selection. I'll be talking you through, first of all, my transfer plans in terms of Game Week 6 and 7 in the short term. I'll be talking about the double game week in specific in Game Week 7, what I plan to do around it, and then also just generally for Game Week 5, how I plan to line up my team, particularly on defense, where I think we've got a lot of defenders who can play in Game Week 5, but there's an opportunity here, of course, to just simply look at some of the easier fixtures and possibly bench, of course, someone that we all have in Estupinian. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is really Game Week 5. I did actually, as I said, move early away from Luke Shaw to Udogie. This was something that I detailed in my transfer plans video right after we sort of reviewed Game Week 4, which was quite a successful week for me. Fortunately, I got a green arrow to the top 15k. I'm really expecting, to be quite honest, that Game Week 5 is going to be a very bad week for me. I don't have Madison. I don't have Son at this moment in time, and my only coverage of this Tottenham team is going to be Udogie. Now, when we look at the clean sheet odds, Tottenham actually have fantastic odds. In fact, they're the highest clean sheet odds this week facing this Sheffield United team. When I talked about in my YouTube video, the What Have We Learned So Far video, we already know that the Sheffield United team doesn't seem to be a very, very good attack. Our initial expectations was as such. And actually, since then, we've probably been underwhelmed, if we're being quite honest. Because when you compare, let's say, to a Luton Town team or even a Burnley team, those two teams have actually played at least 3 games, 1 game less than everyone else. Sheffield United have played 4 games so far and still are the second worst attack in the league. And of course, Burnley being first is a little bit expected because we expect, of course, that 1 less game to have a huge impact. Now, that's, of course, going to be a huge plus for a Spurs team that we don't expect to be a particularly good defense. But you now have an opportunity, and I do especially, with Udogie having an attacking fullback in a very good fixture where hopefully, of course, Tottenham get this clean sheet. And what I do like about Udogie going forwards, and what I didn't really want to deal with Pedro Porro is, of course, now that you're seeing that the Spurs team actually get knocked out of the EFL Cup, there's probably going to be some sort of rotation because I think Emerson is much more competent as a sort of backup and even someone who can actually even start some games for this Tottenham team going forwards. Whereas even though Pedro Porro has fantastic underlying stats, that threat is still there. Whereas with Udogie and Ben Davies, I feel like Ben Davies is just there pretty much to cover the minutes that Udogie can't play. Such as, for example, when he got semi-injured in Game Week 3 and just sort of asked to be subbed off early. And then Ben Davies covered that 20-25 minutes. Right now, especially with Game Week 4 where Udogie played pretty much the full game, you now have an opportunity to look at Udogie as a permanent pick. I don't like, of course, Tottenham's fixtures for Game Week 6 and 7, which is why when I moved into a Tottenham player this week, I made sure that my team going forwards actually has the ability to sort of survive without him. What we do have, of course, is Estupinian in Game Week 6, who's going to have a great fixture versus Bournemouth at home. And then when you look at this week, he's clearly someone to bench because with the clean sheet odds that you have here, Brighton have really, really bad odds. I don't even think you should be starting Estupinian. We have players like Saliba here who we can easily start. And then actually when we look at someone like Malo Gusto, I am actually seeing him as a potential starter as well, because you could argue versus someone like Saliba, even though Arsenal have higher clean sheet odds, you're still looking at an attacking fullback. What I am a little bit concerned with in terms of Malo Gusto is really how many minutes he's going to play. He could play 60 minutes, he could play 65 minutes. There's even a possibility where if Reece James was actually fit, recovered well throughout the international break, that he might start this game in Game Week 5. We'll probably get enough information from this from Pochettino, but I also have to say that actually Bournemouth away seems like quite a tough fixture to keep a clean sheet in, which is why, of course, this Chelsea team actually have less odds of getting a clean sheet compared to this Arsenal team away from home versus Everton themselves. When I'm actually looking at my transfer plans, that's also creating an issue, right? Because Gusto going forwards is unlikely to continue starting for this Chelsea team, even though he's been incredible. In fact, in his most recent U21 game, I believe he actually got a goal and assist. So he's doing incredibly well so far. And we can also see a little bit of a partnership going on with Sterling. Yes, of course, he laid off 2 very simple assists to Sterling. But the reality is there is a sort of partnership in a triangle on that right-hand side now. And it's interesting to see what Pochettino does about that. Because, of course, Reece James is a captain of the team. Maybe he's actually just going to take Gusto's spot away as soon as maybe Game Week 5. And if not, Game Week 6. And that's why I'm planning to do a transfer of Malo Gusto out towards Trippier. And you can also see that's why I've saved as much money in the bank as I have so far. The reason why I wanted to go for Udogie early is so that I wasn't really, really restrictive with this price. And ultimately, when you look at the transfer, it's only going to cost me 2.4 to go to someone like Trippier next week, especially since I've already bagged 2 price rises from Malo Gusto. So some really, really good early team planning so far that's paid off well. And the transfer plan, as I said, is to capitalize on this Trippier great fixture in Game Week 6. Now, the one concern I would say with Game Week 6 is Trippier does actually have a lot of fixtures coming in now, EFL Cup games, Champions League games, and of course these Premier League games too. You could argue that actually the toughest game on the calendar is going to be that Champions League game versus Milan. Maybe, of course, it could be the EFL Cup game, but I do think, for example, the City team will rotate. Maybe even Newcastle will too. Maybe we'll actually see Livermento play instead. Whereas I think for this Newcastle team, the league is probably the most important, and then Champions League as well. So that's sort of how I'm seeing it right now. I think Trippier will be playing still the Premier League games, and I'm not so worried about the rotation. Ultimately, even though Kieran Trippier is one of the older players in the Premier League, you can see that he played 3,300 minutes of football last season. That's incredible. And actually, you'll struggle to actually find many other competing defenders of many younger ages that actually played that many minutes last season. And if he's capable of being fit for those, and I even looked back at, for example, his Atletico Madrid history, what Simeone did actually was rest him for a lot of league games and then actually play him in the Champions League. But I think he's actually shown, of course, especially with international duty, that he's capable of actually playing 2 games a week. And that's sort of the expectation that I have for Trippier. He's essential to this Newcastle team. You also have to think that from a managerial point of view too, a lot of these managers have to win. Every game is almost a must-win game in the Premier League. So I still see Game Week 6 as a great opportunity to move into Trippier. And hopefully we'll get some rotation actually before that game. But I think it's rather unlikely. So that's my sort of rough plan to go from Malo Gusto to Trippier. Yes, of course, the rotation is something to think about. But I really think that we also shouldn't overreact to it as well. This is a time to actually think about Trippier as an option, and he has incredible underlying stats. Even in the really tough games that Newcastle faced so far, they've actually been one of the top half teams in terms of expected goals conceded, which is shocking because they faced City, Liverpool, Brighton. I would actually put all 3 of these teams as part of the top 5 to 6 attacks in the Premier League. And they also had to face this Aston Villa team too, where you can easily put them top half as well. So the fact that Newcastle have come out of these fixtures with really good expected goals conceded bodes well for the future, where hopefully they can finally get some clean sheets going. So that's the track plan for Trippier in Game Week 6. And because of the Game Week 7 double Game Week fixture being announced, this Luton game versus Burnley sort of being rescheduled, now Burnley have this additional game on top of Newcastle. And then for Luton, they have an additional game on top of Everton. So I actually think when you look intuitively, of course, the Luton fixtures are the ones to target. Because with Burnley, even though you might expect for them to do a little bit better than Luton in that sort of mirror matchup, the concern, of course, is simply, look, the additional fixture is Everton versus Newcastle. It's a very simple task to choose which team you'd rather back the double game week of, and it's, for me, Luton Town. On top of that, Luton actually have really good fixtures. So actually, if I was a manager who is stuck, right, looking for a budget forward, for example, Morris is actually right there this week too. If you're looking for a keeper for whatever reason, or you're even wildcarding this week, I might even change my plans to actually incorporate, for example, Morris into my team. I might even incorporate another double game week playing keeper in my team too. Just because we have really good budget keepers now in terms of Areola. Turner less so, because we know that Lacadia Moss is probably going to take that spot eventually. But right now you have an opportunity here, of course, to, if you, let's say, are on a wild card, to actually capitalize on the double game week and actually plan ahead of some other people. What I would also say, though, is if you're not on a wild card, absolutely do not use this time to overreact to the double game week 7. Morris probably is actually all you really need from this Luton Town team. And if you can't get Morris, I actually think you can probably skip them altogether. What I could do, of course, is, since I'm struggling as well with the keeper myself, is even though Pickford has a really good game on paper in game week 7, which is actually going to be Luton Town at home, I do think there's an opportunity, of course, to move into, let's say, someone like Kaminsky. And that's if you have an extreme lack of faith, for example, in someone like Pickford. I myself am probably not going to be doing that move. I'll be looking instead towards someone like Julian Alvarez in my team in Game Week 7, where hopefully he's not been rotated out of this Man City team yet. And if he hasn't been rotated, then I don't necessarily need to move to Morris. However, if he does start to get rotated, and we see that in terms of Game Week 5 or Game Week 6, then this is a really easy opportunity to actually move in Game Week 7 towards Morris. And I'm not saying I'm going to captain Morris right now, but he would be a very sensible transfer, particularly if we're starting to see Julian Alvarez being rotated. I'd then be able to save a little bit more money in the bank and probably play around with upgrading my team in other positions. Maybe I can even stretch towards going 3 forwards in the future, because saving that money could actually mean that I could get João Pedro back in my team. So that's sort of my rough transfer plans that I have in my mind. And as I said, we don't need to overreact to the fixtures. I probably wouldn't be looking at a Burnley player. I probably also wouldn't be overreacting towards getting a Luton player in my team. Now, if you're planning for something really intricate, like Bench Boost 7, you could do that, but I don't really think this is the opportunity to do so. I'd probably pass up on it. Now, in terms of my team selection this week, as I said, because I brought in Udogie, the beautiful thing here is I get to capitalize on this sort of great clean sheet opportunity. And also, he's an attacking fullback. So there's a lot of upside for Udogi that we've seen so far. Even in the previous week when he didn't keep a clean sheet, you saw an assist. And even him getting into bonus points, which suggests, of course, that he's a very creative player and someone who's actually very integrated into the system and someone who will contribute a lot just in terms of pure passing. So that's something I really love about Udogi. And because he's nailed, he was the simple and obvious choice for Porro. Plus, he actually gives me the opportunity to move out of Gusto and into Trippier. So Udogi obviously is in the team. And then Pickford is someone that I've decided to keep on the bench in the hopes of actually getting hopefully one of Turner's last few starts for the team. We got some updated news today from Nottingham Forest that apparently internal sources are suggesting that, of course, as we expect, Lokotomos is going to be the number one keeper. But as I said, because Turner has also done good so far, I do think he's going to be the starting keeper. And I'm hoping, of course, that he gets to start versus Burnley at home. And then actually in terms of the other two defenders, simply because of clean sheet odds being so good for Arsenal, I actually think this is a great opportunity to play Saliba finally. I have actually put him on the bench for the last 2 weeks, reluctantly, I suppose. And also, this is a good opportunity to simply just play Chilwell. Now, Chilwell has actually been super underwhelming so far, not in terms of his underlying stats and not in terms of, let's say, his output in terms of that one goal he got in the Liverpool Game Week 1 fixture, but actually in terms of his minutes, right? When we're looking at this Pochettino team, we were expecting Chilwell to at least play left back, but we got a little bit better in terms of getting Chilwell as a left winger. But recently, he's also been a very early subs at 60 minutes or 63 minutes. So there's a genuine risk that if Pochettino insists in playing Chilwell at this left wing position, that we can continue to see these early subs, which is actually not something that's very positive and doesn't really bode well for Game Week 5. So that's a concern that I have. But for Game Week 5, I still think you take this opportunity here to play against Bournemouth away. Hopefully, Chilwell gets another left wing start. Or even if he plays left back, you hope that, let's say, Colwell actually slots back into left center back and that Chilwell here gets an opportunity to play left back and still play a rather attacking role within the team. Clearly, of course, he is the much more attacking fullback, even to let's say, Malo Gusto, even though Gusto himself has gotten 2 assists. I just think when you just watch naturally, that's the sort of the role he plays. And Gusto is probably a little bit better of a one-on-one defender too. So that's going to be the player I play. I'm actually going to bench Malo Gusto as well, just to play a 3-back. There's no reason here, in my opinion, to actually double up with the Chelsea defense. I think this is a worse fixture on paper than, let's say, comparing back to last week when they were facing Nottingham Forest at home, even though, of course, Awani has been absolutely lights out. But as I said, because I can't really be certain that Malo Gusto is going to play a 90-minute game, I don't see the opportunity here to sort of play him over, let's say, a Saliba. Gusto will just be the first player on my bench. And then in terms of the midfield this week, I will actually be playing Mbumo, Fernandes, Rashford, Saka, and also Sterling. This is an opportunity, in my opinion, to play Mbumo simply because I don't have better options. But if you, let's say, have better forwards this week, I would actually consider benching Mbumo. Yes, of course, Mbumo has the hype, and he deserves all of the hype because he's actually one of the best players in the league. We've seen it in terms of underlying stats so far. We called him out as a very, very early top pick. But this is going to be one of his worst fixtures possible. So if you actually have the opportunity to bench Mbumo, I would probably do it, particularly if you, let's say, have a stronger defense than me, or as I said, maybe a third attacker in the forward position that can actually replace Mbumo. So I will be playing Mbumo a little bit reluctantly, and then I have actually Rashford and Fernandes. What we talked about as well in the what we've learned so far series is that this Brighton team have actually continuously been slipping from the defensive numbers, and actually they're getting worse and worse as the games go by. The fact that they're actually so open as a defense bodes well, in my opinion, for this United team that are at least playing at home. So you're hoping, of course, even though that United might concede because this Brighton team is such a lethal attacking team, that they have opportunities themselves, and that players like Rashford and even Fernandes, who's been exceptional in the international break, can actually finally get some good numbers here, even at home, versus on paper, a very tough top half team in Brighton. So those are my thoughts in terms of Rashford and Fernandes. As far as Saka, this is still a good fixture, Everton away. I still love, of course, a Saka home captaincy. Don't really see the opportunity here. It's still Everton away. We saw actually Arsenal get a few bogey results, to be honest, versus this Everton team. I'm not the type of manager who looks historically from time to time. For example, you could have said that a lot of Liverpool-Chelsea matches in Game Week 1, would go 0-0, and that's clearly not the case. I don't see football that way, and even though it's a good fixture on paper, I don't think it's amazing. And that's why Saka plays. He also just simply has a decent run up until, let's say, they face Man City, where we can probably think about actually maybe even replacing him, a game week or two before that, and actually reevaluate how I think about, let's say, Maddison or Son by that time, and actually move out of Saka into one of those Tottenham players. So that's sort of my rough plan for Game Week 8. And as far as the last player in my midfield here in Sterling, a great opportunity here with a Bournemouth away team that actually have been very, very bad in terms of the defensive point of view. We saw them concede as well quite a bit to the Spurs team. And ultimately, we know that with Iraola as a manager, and we're not expecting a standout defense. They are actually quite an aggressive team, and ultimately that should hopefully leave opportunities for this Chelsea team that have actually been quite resolute so far to do well. So Sterling is someone that I'm staying and keeping in my team. I had the opportunity, of course, to go into Son instead of actually, let's say, going for Udogi, but from a price point of view, I think I've protected my team quite nicely. And on top of that, I just don't see the opportunity to take a -4 for Son, particularly when Sterling himself is a good fixture. And I don't think there's a need to sort of completely overreact. We might even see, for example, that Son could slot back into a left sort of wide mid position. I'm actually a little bit skeptical of that. I do think he'll play in the central forward position, but I've already seen a lot of people suggesting that we could even see Brennan Johnson, for example, as the starting 9. We'll see what happens, of course. It's interesting to see what Brennan Johnson has been brought to do because, of course, he's a very different player to Kulusevski, even though he's had some experience at the right wing position. It really just depends on what Angie really shows us in the near future. And that's why information gathering over game week 6 and 7 is actually very important, because when we're reevaluating the Spurs player in game week 8, we can make a better and more informed decision then. As far as the forward position, is very simple. I'm just going to be playing Alvarez and Haaland. Now, if there's some sort of crazy leak, for example, that I think Alvarez might be benched simply because of, let's say, his inability to recover coming back from Bolivia, I do think that I might just play Estupiñán or Gusto, as I said, over him. It is a good opportunity, in my opinion, still, though, to play Alvarez. Yes, of course, it's West Ham away, but the City team are still one of the top offenses in the league, and I don't think I'd pass up an opportunity to go for a Julian Alvarez start. As I said, I don't think we'll probably see a leak, and actually, I do see, for example, Julian Alvarez in that starting 11 for the City team, so that is my thoughts and feelings right now as to the forward position. As far as captaincy this week, I think this is a good opportunity for people who are invested into the Spurs attackers, or even, for example, someone like Mo Salah, to actually consider maybe going away from the Haaland captaincy. Now, because it's actually a Liverpool away fixture, I'm probably not going to sold on the Salah captaincy. I'd probably still captain Haaland at that point. But generally, if you have an opportunity and you've actually gone for Son, particularly if it's a luxury transfer for you and you've got 2 free transfers, not too many problems in your team, I do see it as an opportunity genuinely to actually go for a Son captaincy. This isn't something that I'm going to be doing, as I said, because it's going to be a -4 for me. And the way I sort of like to manage my FPL team is to fix problems first. And clearly Luke Shaw was a problem, and my Game Week 5 defense was a huge problem. So the fact that I've solved that with Udogi transfer is something I'm already happy with. And I'll just simply be going with an Erling Haaland captaincy. There's nothing too controversial here. I don't really see any other player in my team that's really worth the captaincy shout. Ultimately, when you look at the team, a lot of away fixtures themselves as well. And I'm not that confident, for example, in my United midfielders, even though they're at home. It's Brighton. And we know that this Brighton team, even though they've been conceding a lot of goals to some weaker teams, actually they seem to show up as well incredibly versus bigger teams. Look at the results versus Arsenal. Look at the results versus Newcastle. And ultimately, that's going to be my team selection for this week in Game Week 5. I hope you guys have a lovely week ahead, and good luck with your game week decisions. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys could like and subscribe and even comment what you guys feel about my team, that would be really appreciated. Hoping to get at least 300 likes on this video and probably break that. And we'll see what happens. Ultimately, I'm in a good position now, but as I said, this is a week where I expect to do poorly. So hoping for the best and looking forward as well to Game Week 6.